everybody, all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you, for coming to the 2011 Fall OCI preview presentation. Because there's so few of you, I'm just going to sit up here and just be really informal. It may seem a bit early to start thinking about participating in this fall's on-campus interview process, and it probably seems even more ridiculous to start thinking about summer jobs for 2012, but it really isn't too early to start. Some of you may still be looking for jobs for this summer, and that's okay, but you also need to start thinking about what's going to happen when you get back to school in August. Before I introduce our panelists, hopefully our 2 panelists, today I want to take a few minutes to talk about kind of the nitty-gritty details of fall on-campus interviewing and exactly how it works. By the beginning of July, our office, the Career Planning Office, will be sending via email to each of you a packet of information that contains our most up-to-date listing of those firms that will be participating in on-campus interviewing. Hi, Kate, we got you up here. Oh, we just got started. I have not even introduced you guys yet. So anyway, by the beginning of July, you'll get an email from our office explaining exactly how to participate in on-campus interviews, who the firms are that are coming on campus, and who the firms are that have asked us to collect resumes, and those firms then contact you and bring you to their office for an interview. We're going to be using your ZIPS email address, so please make sure that you're checking that email regularly over the summer, because that's what we'll be using to send out that packet and also to send out updates as we get them. So once you receive the packet, and I have last year's packet with me, I'm going to pass it around so you can kind of take a look at it and see what to expect and what's in there and stuff, and just pass it around. So once you get that packet, please make sure you read it carefully and mark important dates on your calendars. There are important deadline dates in there. There are important interview dates in there. And like I said, there will also be a list of all the firms that are coming on campus and the firms that are doing resume collections. So just please make sure that you read that carefully. I'm amazed at how many students come back at the end of August and they wonder why their fellow students are walking around in suits having interviews. And when they ask me what's going on, I said, well, didn't you get the OCI packet over the summer? Well, yeah, I think I saw something, but I didn't read it. Okay, well, you've got to read it. So please make sure that you're not one of those students who's walking around. And I don't think you will be, because you actually took the time to be here today. So I think you're all in pretty good shape. And if at any time during the summer you have any questions about the packet, or if you haven't received it by like July 15th, please call our office. Don't assume that it's coming. Your email address could have been wrong, whatever, could have gone into your junk mail. Just please call us. Don't hesitate to ever call. We're here all summer long. Now, once you read the packet and you decide which of those firms you would like to apply to, make sure that you submit to us all of the materials that each firm is asking for. Some firms just ask for a resume, others want a cover letter and a resume, some want a transcript and a writing sample in addition. Every firm has their own criteria. So please make sure that you're looking at that and that you're submitting the correct materials. I also really want to stress how important it is for you to do research about each of the firms before you submit your materials. Only submit your materials for those firms in which you have a genuine interest. Don't just send a resume to every firm, even if you would never want to work there. It's not fair to your fellow students, and it doesn't look good for us if you're offered an interview and you then decide, oh no, sorry, I don't want to work for you, I'm not going to take your interview. So please make sure that you do some research about each of the firms. Most of the firms that come on campus are the large corporate type law firms. Those are the firms that recruit by doing on-campus interviews, and they have great websites. We may have some printed material in the Career Planning Office. It's very easy to get information about different firms. Come on in, guys. It's very easy to get information about firms by just looking them up, looking at their website. So please make sure that you do your homework before you submit to the fall OCI. There's a packet going around for you to look at. It's last year's fall on-campus interview packet. I just want you to see. And what I was just talking about was that by the beginning of July, you will get to your ZIPS email address a packet of information from the Career Planning Office with all the firms that are coming on campus and instructions on how to apply. So please make sure that you're looking for that at the end of June, beginning of July, and if you don't get it, please make sure you call us. Okay, so that's kind of what you missed. Also want to stress that, and I think I just kind of alluded to that, many of the firms that participate in fall OCI at any law school, not just here at Akron Law School, but at any law school, tend to be the big corporate firms that are very grade conscious. They often want to interview those students in the top 15%, 20% of the class. And I want you to be aware that despite this, the Career Planning Office, we send to those firms everyone's resume who submits it. We don't pre-screen resumes. We submit your resume. Even if you are number 99 out of 100 in your class, we will submit your resume because my feeling is you might have some life experience or some prior job or something that you've done in your past that firm might be interested in. So it's really up to the law firm itself to choose then which students they want to interview when they come on campus. And that's how it works. We submit everyone's resume who gives it to us, and the firm then selects the 10 or 15 or however many students that they want to interview during the fall on-campus interview when they're here. This year, the actual interviews will be starting, I think, on August 25th is our first day of interviews. So pretty much as soon as classes start, on-campus interviews start. So that means, you get your packet from us beginning of July. The first deadline for submitting your resume to us is often before the end of July. You've got to get us all those materials. We then forward them to the firm. The firm calls us and tells us which students they want to interview on campus, and then Jeannie Kennedy in our office will either call you or email you and say, you've been selected for an on-campus interview. Here are the times that are available, and you sign up for a time slot. And the interviews take place here at the law school, usually in 133 or 134 downstairs off the atrium. Sometimes we use different conference rooms around the building depending on what's going on that day. So that's how it works. Obviously, you want to wear interview attire when you go on your on-campus interview. You want to do even more research about that particular firm that you've been selected to interview with. You really want to go in and be prepared for that interview. I can't stress that enough. And Joel Holt and I are available all summer if you want to prepare for interviews, if you need resume help. I know a lot of you have been working with us already on getting your resumes together. I encourage you, if you haven't already done that, please make an appointment at some point after exams to get your resume in shape so that when you get that fall OCI packet, your resume is ready to go. We can help you with cover letters as well, and we'll give you advice on writing samples and anything else that you've got questions about. But don't wait until the day before the deadline and then call us and say, we need some resume help because we might not be available to help you. So, make an appointment. If you're here in Akron working somewhere over the summer, you can make an in-person appointment. We can do it via email, however it works out best for you. But make sure that your resume is ready to go when that first deadline comes about. Make sure you proofread your resumes and your cover letters carefully. No typos, no grammatical mistakes. Have a friend or a relative proofread it for you before you submit it. And then finally, practice interviewing. Don't go into the on-campus interview. You are going to be so nervous for those first couple of interviews that you've got. So practice. Come in and talk to either Mr. Holt or me about what kinds of questions you should be expected to answer, or what kinds of questions you should ask. So, and that's what our panelists are here also to talk to you about, give you a little bit of an idea of what they went through last year. And I also want to stress, before I introduce our panelists, that very few law students nationwide get their jobs through on-campus interviewing. It's a very visible thing that goes on every year at law schools, but I would say 5 to 10% maybe of law students get their jobs that way. It's just one avenue for you to use in your job search. So remember that. If at the end of on-campus interviewing you don't have a job, it's not the end of the world. There are a lot of opportunities that arise between, October of your second year and May, the end of your second year. But I would encourage all of you to participate, just to throw it out there. If you can take rejection, I had a friend in law school who hung all his rejection letters on his wall, and that was his decoration. And he didn't really care about it, but he had done on-campus interviewing, and he got a job a different way. So it's a great avenue. It's good interview practice. And these are some of the best and biggest firms in Northeast Ohio that participate in our interview program. So are there any questions about the nitty-gritty part before we talk to our panelists? I know it's a lot of information I'm throwing out there at you, but okay, and I just want to add one more thing. We had a little bit of an issue this morning. We have a job out there right now for the Smucker Company, and I don't know if it applies. Are any of you second years in here? You're all first years? So it really doesn't apply to you because they're looking for second year students. And we did have a couple of first year students that asked us if they would consider first years, and we called Smucker, and they really want second year students. But I'm kind of giving you this as a cautionary tale for next year. Smucker called us again this morning, and they said, we've gotten very few applications from Akron. We've gotten a lot of applications from Cleveland Marshall and from Case. Why is that? I don't know why that is. I really don't know. And, it's a great job. They pay rather well. It's great experience. I don't know why our students aren't applying, but Smucker is obviously interested in hiring an Akron law student. They've now extended the deadline for our students to submit their materials to May 9th, just to give our students a little bit more time, because they are asking for writing sample and cover letter and transcript and resume. So they're giving our students time, but don't let that be you next year. If you see a job that you're even remotely interested in, jump on it. Okay, so same thing with this fall on-campus interviewing. You've got to jump on every opportunity that's presented to you, because especially in this day and age, there aren't that many opportunities out there. So make sure that you jump on every one that we have for you. So anyway, without further delay, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Katie Gehring. Katie is a second-year full-time student, and she will be working this summer at Brennan Manna and Diamond here in Akron. And our other panelist is Stephen Gambita. Steve is a third-year part-time student, and Stephen is going to be working at Dickstein Shapiro in Washington, D.C. this summer. So I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask them that I think will give you an idea about what to expect based on Stephen and Katie's experiences last year, and then I'd like to open it up for questions. So let's just take turns. You can both answer the question. So my first question is, how many resumes did you submit for OCI last year?
I submitted 2 resumes for OCI, and that doesn't include, there's also a list of off-campus interviews as well.
Like the resume collect?
The resume.
Resume collect, meaning the firms that aren't going to come on campus but that want to see resumes of Akron law students. And how did you pick the 2 that you submitted for?
Basically, I looked at the type of law firm that I wanted to work for, and I wanted to practice more of IP litigation, and intellectual property litigation is more geared towards larger firms to middle-sized firms. And so I looked at the size of the firm, and then I looked at the actual practice groups online to see if those firms on the list actually had the type of law that I wanted to practice.
Katie? I submitted 4, and how I picked them was, I'm from Akron, so I knew I wanted to stay in the Akron area or Northeast Ohio-ish. So I pretty much, I don't know how many there were, like out of state or not in Northeast Ohio, but I pretty much applied to all the ones that were around here, especially Akron. I was willing to go to Cleveland or Canton, but pretty much Akron. And I'm like kind of a blank slate on what I want to do, so it didn't really matter to me.
How did you pick them? Just location?
Yeah, and I like read up on them. I mean, I know some attorneys in the area, so I kind of asked around to them, like what they thought about the firm, or what the firm is known for, and things like that.
Right. Now, out of the resumes that you submitted, how many interviews did you get?
4.
Okay.
2.
2. Okay, good. Now, that's not probably a typical. I think those numbers are low. Also, we have students who submit to every firm that comes on campus. And as long as you're willing to work at any of those firms, that's fine to do. And there are some students who submit to every firm and get one interview. So, like I said before, it's kind of a, for lack of a better term, a crapshoot. But you've got to be in it to be selected. They're not going to pick somebody, obviously, who doesn't even submit their resumes. Now, how did you go about getting your resumes together for OCI? What process did you go through?
I definitely was in touch with you and Career Services quite a bit for just to review my resume and make sure that I was on the right track for writing.
Yeah, I had never done a resume before, so I kind of had to start from scratch, and definitely worked with career planning like multiple times. I know I was in the office at least 2 times for a resume and 1 time for mock interview, and lots of emailing too.
Did any of the firms that you submitted your resume for also want a cover letter?
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
Okay. And how did you, I think it's really important when you submit a cover letter to a firm to personalize that cover letter. It can't be just a form letter. It needs, obviously you're going to have a template of some sort that you're going to work off of, but it's important to tell the particular firm why you want to work for them. You don't want to just tell a firm that you want a job. You want that job. And so that, I think, is the hard part. Chime in if you... That's the hard part, is convincing a firm that you want that job at that firm. So how did you go about, how did you tell Brennan, Manna, and Diamond that you wanted to work for them?
Well, I don't remember specifically, but I want to say, like, I had a couple paragraphs that were like pretty standard about me and my goals and what I wanted to do, and then I kind of dedicated the last paragraph more to like talking about Brennan and the things that I liked about their firm and how it's in Akron and how I want to stay in Akron.
And things like that are important, especially, I think, to firms in Northeast Ohio. It's not
Yeah.
New York or Chicago or Boston, where firms kind of expect that people are going to come for, 2 to 4 years and then move on. In Akron and even Cleveland and Canton, they expect, or they hope that their summer associates and their new associates will have some ties to the area, so you want to make sure you're talking about that in a cover letter, and that they're in it for the long run, because honestly, a firm doesn't make any money from their brand new associates. They're paying you a lot more than you're bringing in to the firm. So, Stephen, how did it work? Now, you didn't actually get your job from on-campus interviewing, which we're going to talk about.
I did not, and I think that's the toughest thing to do, because at least not for OCI, but when I was down the road, when I was kind of sending out cold cover letters, it's hard to put in information that's specifically targeted when you don't know, specific information about the firm. I knew about the website and I knew about the firm, but I didn't have any specific insight.
Right.
But a lot of times I know what department or what type of law I wanted to practice, so I at least would express my interest in that specific practice group for the firm. And if you do know anybody or you've heard anything about that firm, you can at least touch on those things that you like about that group or that firm that you've heard about.
And I think, oh, go ahead.
No, you're the panel.
Oh, I was just gonna say, that's one thing that I did say, like, I kind of knew, because I was a blank slate on what I wanted to do. I wanted a firm that practiced like all different areas, so I kind of stressed that in my cover letter, like, I see you have a broad practice area, that's something that appeals to me, the opportunity to try many different areas of law.
And I'd like to chime in here and just say, if you never come in to see one of us, okay, about your resume and cover letter, that's fine, well, not fine, that's your decision. But do yourself a favor and look at your cover letter and review it very critically, paragraph by paragraph, and make sure you take out everything that refers to me. You don't, we talked about giving them sort of like tidbits about, I want to be in Northeast Ohio, but the most important thing is in those 3 or 4 paragraphs that you keep all the time, is you need to talk about what you're going to give to the employer. not about all the great stuff you're gonna get out of the experience, you know, I'm gonna get great mentorship experience, I'm gonna apply what I've learned in school and all these things that are in 98% of the cover letters that I've seen. You need to get rid of that stuff, and you need to say, hey, I can do X, Y, and Z, and I can do it for you, and it's gonna be good for you, so.
I mean, you don't want your cover letter to sound like you're gonna come in and save the firm. You know, you're, after all, you know, you're a second-year law student, but Joel's right. You need to tell them what's in it for them. What benefit are you gonna bring to that firm, not how they're gonna benefit you. That's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, you do not want to say, I think this will be, you know, a great experience that helped me in my career by being able to work here and to be able to learn all this stuff. I've seen that before, and that certainly turns the employer away.
I have another question too, quickly.
Yes.
Is how much, this is the thing, this is the dirty little secret behind all this. How much work did you put in to those 4 resumes and, you know what I'm saying, like getting everything right?
Hours over like months.
In addition to your normal work,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of update mine, I feel like, almost every month. I have on my computer, I have a list of like updated every month. So I didn't necessarily spend a bunch of time for a couple of days creating it as I put in the work throughout the year, and continually I stop in
And that's
get it
something
checked
that you
out.
should do throughout your career. You know, in 25 years, you should still be updating your resume as you go along. But that was a good question. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time to even prepare yourself to submit your resume and your cover letter for fall OCI. So as I was saying before, you know, you're not going to get this packet, and if the first deadline is July 15th, don't call us on July 14th and say, well, okay, I need to put my resume together now. It needs to be done, you know, after exams, start thinking about it. Yeah.
How soon can you update your resume if you have a job, or you haven't started them, but you want to send out your resume and you want those on?
I would say as soon as you start the job, it's good. I don't know that I would put a future job on there if you haven't started it yet. I think as soon as you start the job, you can say, you know, May 1 to present or something like that. Do you disagree with that?
I go either way, I think.
You mean to put your summer job on there?
For
or something?
example, my most recent job is at like a restaurant, let's say, and now I'm gonna be clerking for a judge, which
Right.
looks a lot better.
Sure.
But I wanna put it there, but I don't wanna do it until I start, but at the same time, I wanna send out my resume, so I don't know what to do about
Well,
that.
when are you starting with the judge?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the exact
I
date.
think if you have a firm commitment, if it's ironclad that you will be working somewhere, and depending on the situation, okay, like you have restaurant experience, you want to get some legal experience on your resume. I think it's okay to have a future job that I've been selected, I've been chosen. Now, don't put bullets about what you're gonna be doing, or, you know, because you don't know, because
Right.
you haven't done anything yet. But I think it's okay.
Selected as, you know, extern,
Right.
you know, and you can put, if it's, you know, April 20th today, you know, May 2011 through July 2011. As long as it's clear that you haven't yet started the position. You don't want anything on your resume ever to be brought into question, because then that brings into question your entire self. So, yeah, and if you want to draft something and have one of us look at it to make sure it's all copacetic and everything, that's fine. So,
And I was just gonna add too, like, there's really no excuse for not having your resume done, like, everybody's busy, but you want a job, like, you'll do it.
yeah. And lawyers are busy people. You need to start now being able to juggle the 20 things in your life that you're going to have to do the rest of your profession.
Yeah,
I mean,
just practical tip, like, if you're not a second year, get ready for that second year. I really think that's what it's all about, just juggling everything.
Mhm.
Sometimes I wish we could back up for cheating.
Right.
That's what we're about.
Right, I mean, it all seems, you know, really busy now, but when you're out there working and you're handling, you know, maybe 10 or 12 matters at a time, I mean, you've got 9 balls up in the air at the same time, and one partner doesn't care that, you know, you've got something else going on for the other partner. I mean, they all want what they want when they want it, and you need to start now showing potential employers that you can handle all of that.
And add in family obligations
Mhm.
so that you
Right.
have that plan for your future.
Let's see, what were we, okay, so the initial fall on-campus interviews that you got, what were they like? They were, usually they're 20 or 30-minute interviews here at the law school, as I mentioned. What kinds of questions did they ask you?
I have three big ones that you're going to get. The first one, let me find it here.
You're so prepared.
That's Stephen.
That's how you need to be.
You're gonna hear, tell me about yourself. You're gonna hear that.
That's like an icebreaker. You know, you walk into the room and you shake hands, and as you're sitting down, so, Stephen, tell me about yourself. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Number two, you're going to hear, why do you want to work here? You need to be ready for that question. And then three, you will hear, do you have any more questions for me?
At the end, right?
Yes. And you don't want to say that I don't have any questions, or you don't want to, be blank when I ask you why you want to work for their firm. You need to be ready, and all this stuff takes preparation and rehearsing it before and anticipating that they're going to ask these.
So let's break those down, each one. So tell me about yourself. You don't just want to reiterate what's on your resume. You don't want to go back to, well, I was born in 1983 in Worcester, Ohio, and you want that to be your, 10 to 15 second elevator speech, something that makes you interesting and unique and maybe leads to further discussion. If you've got some cool hobby, you don't have to be a stuffy intellectual lawyer when you answer that question. That's not what they're looking for. They want to look, they want to see if you're somebody that is interesting and funny and warm and somebody that they can work side by side with 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week.
And
So
that's definitely a question that you want to have kind of like a scripted but natural response to, because that's kind of going to set the tone for the whole rest of the interview. Like, I remember when I did a mock interview with you guys, and that's how you started off, and I sat there, I was like, I don't know what to say, because you could really go so many directions with it. Like, I always tried to insert things that I could build off of later in the interview, or something that maybe an interviewer would pick up on and maybe ask me a question about that later.
And there's, this is your time to, you don't want to be arrogant, but it's your time to brag about yourself a little bit. I'm a really hard-working second-year law student. Throw in some buzzwords, if they're true, about yourself that you think an employer would be interested in hearing. Conscientious, hardworking, and tell stories. I mean, you've only got there, 10 to 15 seconds. You don't want to tell me about yourself and it lasts 12 minutes. So you've got to be quick and concise and make them want to know more about you in that quick time period.
And also, depending on the interview too, people have different styles. Like, for one of the interviews I had for the OCI, we sat down and he said, what would you like to talk about today? What would you like to talk about? And that was fine, because he had come here a couple months before that and told us about what interviews with him are like. So I was kind of prepared for that already. But you just need to be ready for anything. And one of the, what would you like to talk about? You just start talking about, what you can do for the firm and your interest and why you want to work there.
Now, and the second one that you mentioned was they're going to ask you why you want to work there. You better have a good answer for that. Don't just be so generic that that answer could be told to any employer anywhere in the country. That's where your research into the particular firm comes in. And it's okay when you go on any interview to have like a little portfolio with you, one of those little black, zip-up things, and you open it up, and to have your, kind of notes just jotted down to yourself to refresh your memory. Because as I said, you're going to be very nervous, and sometimes when you're nervous, you may have all these great answers in your head, but as soon as you sit down, you're like, oh my God, what's my name? You forget these things. So it's okay to open it up and take notes for yourself as you're doing your research on the firm. But that is really critical. We get surveys back from employers. We give them a survey form for each student that interviews with them. And one of the questions is, how prepared was this student? And it always amazes me how many students don't get good grades on how prepared they were.
So
the one thing you can control is how prepared you are. And another thing, talking about having notes for yourself, here's a news flash for you. When you get up and do a closing argument, or you do an appellate argument, or you do anything, you have notes. Nobody gets up there and just
Winged it.
extemporaneously speaks, like Clarence Darrow or something. So the simple fact that you have notes is actually demonstrating to the interviewer that you're prepared,
Right.
as opposed to just coming in and trying to wing it. So the combination of nervousness, no notes, stuttering and stammering as you're trying to figure out what you're going to say is going to indicate to the employer it's not the kind of person I want, because they're not prepared and they can't handle it.
If you didn't think enough of this firm in this interview to take the time to prepare for it, why do they want to offer you a job?
Like, I always had a typed, written piece of paper, because depending on what time of the day it is, you could have class before, like, this is not something you want to be doing like the hour before your interview. So I always had something typed up, like very simply, bullet pointed, like who I was interviewing with, like what school they went to, what areas they practiced, and then like a few questions, and like, I would almost like take the attitude of, I can sometimes be a shy person, but like in the interview you have to turn it on, so I would take the attitude of like confidence, and they have all your paperwork laid out on the table, so I would come in and open up my stuff, and just lay it out like, hey, I'm prepared too, like I have stuff to ask you too, and they can see that, it's typed out,
And they're looking at you not as a law student, but as a future colleague. So, while you are still in law school, they're looking at you, how are you going to behave down the road, as a representative of their firm? Are you someone that they would feel comfortable with, not as a summer associate, and probably not as a first, second, or third year associate, but in the long run, sending out to a client meeting, or conducting a deposition or something like that. So you need to put yourself in the mind frame of, I am a law student, but I'm interviewing for a real lawyer job, and that's what they're looking for. So, and then the third one was, that Stephen said he always got was, do you have any more questions for us? Never say no to that question. You always have to have questions prepared for them. The interview should end because time runs out, not because you run out of questions to ask. And they need to be well thought out questions, not questions that you could easily find the answer to on their website. You don't want to ask, so, what areas of practice does your firm engage in? That's on everybody's website. You want to ask good, thought-provoking kinds of questions. And we do have some questions in our career planning handbook, which all of you should have gotten at your first year career planning orientation back in November. But when you schedule a mock interview with us over the summer, we can go over more of those questions. So, do you have some examples of questions
Yeah.
that you did ask?
you really have to be active in your interview, and I know that sounds kind of weird because like you should be paying attention, but you need to like very quickly latch on to things that people say while you're interviewing, and that's your time to like come back to them and ask them about that, or that's when you need to have your list of typed up questions like, oh, so I see your real estate law practice just accomplished this, or I see you have an emerging China practice. Like I know that was one that I talked about. Like I thought that was so interesting, and I was able to express like my innovative spirit by appreciating their innovative spirit by going into this like emerging market. That's why you really need to like research their website, run like a Google search of them, and know other attorneys that work at the firm, because at VMD, like I'm from Akron, and I didn't even realize how many people that I knew that worked there. And that's like another good time to say, oh, so do you work with this person often, or I know them from this. It's kind of like name dropping without like name dropping. I don't know if that's a good idea, but I just happen to have like a lot
Well,
of.
I don't think it's good to name drop if you don't have any substance behind it.
Yeah, like these are people that I knew like pretty well. So.
Any other suggestions, Stephen, for questions that you ask?
I have a couple suggestions. The first thing that I just wanted to mention before I get into that is, when you're asked the question, a lot of times you can spin it around and ask them something back to keep the conversation flowing. So at the end of, maybe they ask you, why do you want to work here? And you go on and you talk about that, and maybe you could say, why did you end up, taking a job here? Why do you like working here? So you can keep the conversation going. Another thing, some advice that I was given from a partner at a firm when I was preparing for some interviews is he said, try to ask questions that show the research. Don't come out and say, I've looked at your website. You can, for example, there was a law firm that I was preparing an interview for, and they had merged back in 2000. And I basically, one of the questions I had was, what kind of changes have you seen with the firm since it merged, or something along those lines? And it shows you that you've actually researched and done your work without coming out and saying, hey, I looked on your website and saw this.
And Katie brought up a good point too. You have to be actively engaged in any interview, really. You want to listen. Again, you're going to be nervous, and this is hard to do, but you need to listen to what this attorney is talking about so that you can come back. Maybe it's not on your little list because he's talking about something that you didn't anticipate, but you need to be thinking while he's talking and come back with follow-up questions to what they're talking about. That's what a good interview really is a good conversation with somebody. So,
And
that's
for
important.
the love of all that's holy, listen to the questions. I mean, once again, you're going to be nervous. I call it, I use the term active listening, where you're not just like blah, 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 and it's washing over
Right.
you. Because, boy, that'll kill you in an interview. If you don't,
Right.
if you answer the question incorrectly, or like answer the wrong question, or don't answer at all. Because or have to say, could you repeat the question, please?
And it's okay, if they do ask you a question and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't know what the answer to that is. Just say, well, that's a good question, and take a few seconds. I mean, you don't want there to be 3 minutes of silence, but it's okay to have, a couple of seconds of silence while you kind of get your thoughts together and come up with an answer. You don't want to just babble on and on and on for the sake of talking and answering the question. Did you have a question?
Yeah, recently in an interview, I was asked about, do I know about their firm? And how do you start answering? I'm gonna keep my answer to myself or whatever, but, because I had researched their firm, but like, do I just say yes, period? Or yes, I know that you do?
No,
Like, what
I
do you
would,
say
I
about
mean, you
that?
never want to give a one-word answer, first of all, so.
This isn't cross-examination.
Right, I would, so
Yes,
was that what they asked you? Do you know about our
You
firm?
literally said, do you know about our firm?
Oh, I know, I really spent a lot of time researching your firm. I looked on your website. I asked some people at the law school that I know. If you knew somebody who worked there before, I talked to whatever the person's name is, and he or she, unless it's a situation, you gotta be careful name dropping if it was a bad situation that this person left because they, stole millions of dollars from the firm or something like that. You don't wanna say, well, I know, he's my best friend. So that's how I would answer that question. And I would not only say, yes, I know about your firm, but I would then give a little bit about, what do I know about the firm? I know that you do this, this, and this, what seems to be important to them, and that this is the kind of person that seems to work at your firm, and you seem to value that, and that. That's the kind of answer that I would give to that.
The most important thing, at least one of I always say that, everything's the most important thing to me. But one thing is to take open-ended questions and not be afraid. People are afraid of open-ended questions, but you should actually embrace those because it gives you the opportunity to basically say whatever you want, as long as you answer their question. So I think Barbara is right in that you should just take that question and just run with it and talk about all the stuff you know and all the research you've done, and I think I would be a really great fit at this firm because of X, Y, and
Yeah, that's the one thing I was gonna suggest is tie it back into
Keep coming
yourself,
back
but
to
I
it.
didn't know, like, if you
Yeah.
should talk.
Yes.
use that term, right?
Yeah, and throughout the interview, you want to exude enthusiasm. You don't ever want them to think like, oh God, this person, she's just here for this interview because she wants a job. It's getting back to the point of you are here for this particular job. So, talking about being a good fit for the firm, or at the end of the interview, you always want to end with, when the time finally does run out, you want to end with, I'm so excited about your firm, thank you so much for interviewing me, and just exude enthusiasm and restate what it is that you want to have happen. I would love to be invited for a call back to your firm. I would love to work for you for the summer, things like that.
you should
So,
be tired after an interview.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I was always tired, and that's another thing,
Yeah.
speaking of like being active and things like that. Like, look at how I'm sitting now, like, I'm sitting back and like relaxed. When I was in my interviews, I always sat up, hands on the table, you know, showing that
Actively
you're-
engaged,
yes.
right?
So pay attention to your posture, because I don't know, I heard somewhere that like when you have your hands on the table, like they're not hitting, it's like a sign that you're more confident. I don't know. But I don't
Yeah.
naturally do that, but I mean,
No,
there's a
but-
difference between sitting like this or like this and then like this.
And be careful, you know, we talked about taking in a portfolio, so, you know, you put your portfolio down on the table, open up your pen so that if you do want to write something down, it's ready to go. Put it down, because you'll have the tendency to do this during an interview because you'll be nervous, so just put the pen down and then sit with your hands on the table. It's a good advice. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I still have some more questions to go through. So that's your on-campus interview. It's 15, 20 minutes, sometimes 30-minute interviews. They go really fast, even though they seem like, oh my God, this is the longest 20 minutes of my life. They go really fast, and then the next step in that process is that the firm will select a few students from those that they interviewed on campus, and they'll invite you back to their firm for what we call a callback interview. And that generally is you go to their firm and you interview with more attorneys, some partners, some associates. You'll meet the recruiting coordinator at the firm, and different firms do it differently. Most firms, it's 2 to 3 hours long. You might meet with 4 or 5 different people for a half an hour at a time. At some firms, you'll walk into a conference room and the 4 or 5 people who you're meeting with are all going to be there in the conference room. So it really depends on the firm and how they do that. And really, that callback interview is a series of short on-campus interviews. You have to remain fresh, especially if you're going from one person's office to the next, you know, back to back to back. That person, you know, person number 2 doesn't know what you talked about with person number 1, so it's okay to ask them the same questions, get a different person's perspective. You know, you don't have to come up with 60 questions to ask, you know, 6 different people. It's okay to use some of your same questions, but you need to remain enthusiastic throughout that callback interview, just as enthusiastic as you were with person number 1. So we'll do some more workshops in the fall about callback interviews, so I don't want to get too much into those today, but can you tell us a little bit about what your experience was with callback interviews?
Typically, you'll probably end up starting with a recruiting coordinator that you will interview with, and you want to be prepared for this. It's not, you know, you shouldn't go into that thinking, well, I need to get ready for the partners and associates that I'm going to interview with. They're just as important as everybody else is, so be equally prepared for them. And then I went through a couple interviews with associates and partners, and then I went out to lunch.
Mm-hmm. That callback interview does often include a meal, either you know, lunch afterwards if your interview's in the morning, or lunch before if you have the afternoon interview. Some firms even might invite you to come out to dinner with a few of them the night before your interview. That's kind of unusual these days, but it could happen. So if you know you get a callback interview from on-campus interview, you should come in and talk to us, and we'll go over that whole procedure with you. Katie, did you have anything about callbacks that you wanted to add?
I was on, BMD had a really short callback. It was like 20 minutes.
Really?
A couple other firms had like all day long callbacks. So make sure you get sleep because it's long. And I had to drive up to Cleveland for my one callback, and it's a grueling process. So you definitely have to be like sharp all day long. You have to like almost put it out of your mind that you're tired, or that it's 3 o'clock and whatever you ate for lunch is like making you sleepy.
And just make sure, you know, this goes for on-campus interviews, it goes for your callbacks. Always arrive early. Leave yourself plenty of time to park your car if you've got to drive up to Cleveland. You know, do a dry run the day before.
Yeah, I did that.
Have cash in your wallet so that you can pay to get out of the parking garage if you have to. Oh, you laugh. We've
Oh
had
no, that's
stories.
because that happened to me the other day.
We've had stories of people who went on an interview, didn't have cash, had to go back in because they couldn't get out of the parking garage. Not a good thing. So, you know, make sure that you know where you're going, and that I would also always bring, and this includes to on-campus interviews, in your portfolio that you carry, bring extra resumes, bring a couple of extra writing samples, bring a list of references. in case they ask for it. It's always nice to say, oh yes, I do have a writing sample for you, instead of, well, no, I don't have a writing sample, but can I get that to you later?
I
It's
had
good
something
to be
happen where my
prepared.
resume didn't print out right, through the firm's printer, when they send it out to people. So I knew the number of people I was gonna be interviewing with, so I printed out extra copies and it actually worked out because I was like, oh, I have it here. Sometimes I wonder if they do that just to see if you're.
You never know,
Get
they
to
might.
expect everything.
They just might do that. Let's see, how did the callbacks differ from the on-campus interviews? Other than that they were longer, did they ask you anything or go into more detail on anything that surprised you?
Mine was a little different because I didn't have an OCI, so my first interview with them was the,
So tell us,
Yeah,
so
we'll
you
call back.
you submitted two on-campus interview, resumes for on-campus interviews. You got two OCIs. Did you get any callbacks from those
I
two?
didn't get either from them.
Okay, so then tell us your story now about how you did get the job at Dixie and Shapiro.
Basically, over 2 months or so, I think I sent out about 70 resumes and cover letters applying to firms, and I think I got back about 68 rejection letters. And I was gonna start putting them up on the fridge, but after I got about 68, I just threw them away. But I just kind of kept at it, and the law firm that I'm working for this summer, they had filled all the positions at the time I applied, but she offered to help me find a job at other places. And if anybody ever gives you help in the legal field, take it, don't.
She being their recruiting
The recruiting coordinator. So if there's a partner that offers to help you, or if there's a recruiting coordinator, absolutely take that help and follow up with them. And I followed up several times, and it worked out.
And what you're not saying is that you were extremely persistent. I mean, you called her, you were in touch with the alum that we have at that firm, you went and talked to a professor here who knows some people at that firm. I mean, Stephen really was persistent. He didn't just take no for an answer that they were, had already filled their positions. He really followed up and was thoughtful about the whole process, and it all worked out in the end. So, OCI didn't work out for Stephen, but the job that he got was probably better than any OCI job that you might have gotten. So,
And I also, for some of the firms that I would send out cover letters and resumes, I would call and follow up with the recruiting coordinators over the phone. Some went well and some did not, but you just have to keep at it even if you get discouraged.
I remember I cried when I got my first rejection letter. I mean, it was on top of a bad day. But I had 3 more interviews after that, so I was like, you gotta keep going.
exactly, you've got to just pick yourself up and move on. You can't let 1 rejection or 2 rejections or 68 rejections get you down, because there's a lot of legal employers out there. I just want to ask you, to kind of wrap up and then give students a chance to ask questions. Is there anything that you know now that you wish you had known then about on-campus interviews, callbacks, getting your resume together? Any advice for things that you learned throughout the process?
Definitely go to career planning. That's number 1 on the list. For me, I think you're not gonna get anywhere unless you go to career planning. Because who do you think contacts all these firms and has them come in?
We didn't pay her to say.
And also, if you're not intentional and thoughtful and prepared, you might as well not even go. Don't think just because you're in the tippy top of the class, your GPA is going to be an automatic shoe in the door, because there are many people who had higher GPAs than I do, and they didn't even get a callback, and I got callbacks for all 4 of mine. So, just, I don't know, you have to be very intentional about the whole process. It can't just be one, I almost put off my schoolwork to interview, because that's how much of a priority it was for me. I'm not saying to do that, I'm a pretty good multitasker, but that was number 1 priority.
But in the long run, you are here at law school to get a job. So, I probably shouldn't say this with the camera running, but it's okay to miss a class if you have an interview. So,
Ask your professor.
Ask your
They'll say
professor,
it's
right.
okay.
Yep. And And, you know, Katie also made a good point, you know, we are the ones obviously who arrange on-campus interviewing, but there's only so much control that we can have over what firms will come to interview here. Some firms these days aren't having summer programs, you know, we make contact with hundreds of firms every year and invite them to come and encourage them to come. We have little control over who comes and who doesn't come. What we do have control over, though, is you will be surprised when an interviewer comes to campus, how often they ask us, they show us, these are the students that I'm interviewing today. Tell me what you can about them. If I've never met you because you've never come in to see me and I say to them, I don't know that student, that is not a good impression on that lawyer from that firm. I knew Katie and I knew Stephen and I got questions about both of them. And so they both have jobs. So, you know, it's really important to get to know us and for us to get to know you so that when an employer asks the question, we can say, you know, I can't talk about, I don't really know what their grades are. I don't know how they are in class. I have no idea, but I do know that they worked hard to get a job. They put a lot of effort into interviewing and resumes and all the stuff that was job related, and I can pass that information along to any employer. And that's impressive to an employer because, you know, the employer is going to find out what their grades are and if they're on law review or not on law review or whatever. But I can talk about, and Joel can talk about what kind of effort they put into this whole job search process.
And also, Joel and Barbara know a lot about the law firms that are interviewing, so, you know, you can, just like they can give good information about you, you can get good information from them about the law firm that, you know, might not be on the website or.
And it's also important to come to us because we might be able to tell you who worked at that firm in the past. You know, and so you can go and talk to somebody who was a summer associate there last summer or the summer before, or somebody who's a new associate there now, and kind of get some inside scoop that you can use on that interview.
Oh, I just thought of a big thing, and I'm sure you're probably gonna say this too, but within the 20 minutes after you walk out of your interview, send an email thank you, because that was one thing that stuck out in my mind that you said last year was that you'd be surprised like how many people don't email to say thank you, because that's just one more way for you to, I don't know, kind of get like extra interviewing time, make yourself stand out, and then after, you know, if you go on a callback, go and interview or go email every single person that you went on a callback with and insert some sort of like personal connection or information.
Something you talked about during that interview with the person. I don't remember who told me this, but I thought it was a good kind of rule of thumb. Send an email thank you before you eat your next meal. So if you had a morning interview and it's done by 11, before you eat lunch that day, send an email thank you to the people that you interviewed with. Because you would be surprised, you know, you think, oh, I interviewed on a Monday, they're probably not going to meet and decide until Thursday, so I've got a couple of days, I'll send them an email thank you on Wednesday. You don't know, that committee, that hiring committee might be getting together that afternoon, and if you've sent an email thank you within an hour, wow, that's pretty impressive. That might tip the scales in your favor against somebody else who interviewed, you know, last week and didn't send a thank you note, so.
And once again, the reasoning behind that is it always everything translates to practice. You're interviewing with people who are practicing law, so you want to show them that you can practice law. Once again, if you're responsive, you're going to respond to their emails, you're going to send them emails. You know, if they call you or send you an email before the interview, you respond immediately because that's what they're going to want you to do for their clients.
I'm always amazed.
You're setting a precedent is what you're doing. You know,
Right.
the best indication of future performance is past performance,
Right.
whether that's true or not.
I'm amazed at how a lot of people don't respond. So if, you know, this goes for when you get an offer from a firm. If you get a telephone call, you know, saying, please call us back, we'd like to offer you the job, don't take 3 days to call them back. What message is that sending? If you were to offer somebody a job and they took you it took them 3 days to get back to you, what would you think?
I left class when I saw the number calling.
You would think, wow, they're really not all that interested. It took her 3 days to call me back. So, you know, make sure you're responsive in every step of the process. Communication is key.
I also, not only do I send an email out, I send a handwritten thank you that night too in the mail, so that it gets there the next morning or at least the next day.
I would say an email followed up by a handwritten note. You know, just go to Target and buy yourself a little box of just plain white note cards. A handwritten note is fine. It doesn't have to be a typed up thank you
Right, it
letter.
shouldn't be.
No, a
It shouldn't
handwritten
be.
one is preferable. Exactly.
They don't want to read, you know.
Yeah.
5 paragraphs, thank you.
Right. So, and just quick and, short and quick, thank you so much for taking time to interview me at Brennan Man and Diamond last Tuesday, or yesterday, not last Tuesday, but earlier today. I really enjoyed speaking about X, Y, and Z, and then that'll make you jump off the paper again after you remember who you are.
Well, I just have 2 quick questions.
Yeah.
One, is it terrible that we never send handwritten thank you notes? Because my handwriting looks like a 2-year-old's. Seriously. It's real bad. And so I sent email thank you cards. and
I
leave
don't
it.
know, I don't think that there's anything wrong with not sending, if your handwriting is that bad, you don't wanna draw attention to
That's
that.
my thought.
I don't think I ever sent,
A handwritten, you got a job.
but I'm wondering, I don't remember if I sent one like after I received my job offer. I don't remember, but after the interview.
It's one of those things in life that I always think, just go that extra step. In everything that you do, take that extra step.
Have somebody else write it for you.
I was just about to ask that.
Mine is really bad too, and I take a really long time.
Take
and
a
actually-
calligraphy class.
Takes them 3 hours to write a one.
It probably does. I have extra cards too, where if I screw it up or it looks bad, I throw it out and write another one over again.
Hey, Steven, tell them, when did you do your thank you notes? Your handwritten thank you notes?
For Dixie,
For Dixie?
I flew into Washington DC and my plane was leaving that night, and I went back to the hotel and I wrote them at the hotel and mailed them. I got them to the post office by 5 p.m. In DC before my plane left, so that they would get them the next day.
What was the second?
If we're want to apply to someone who's not coming on campus, at what time should we start doing that?
Is it a large law firm?
This is a hypothetical.
Okay, if it's a large law firm, I would start applying mid-July, mid to end of July. Law firms are getting, the big firms. Now, for smaller, medium-sized firms, they're not even, is there a professor out there waiting for class? Yeah, we have no. But I would say mid to late July, you should start, because law firms are getting bigger, earlier and earlier